We're introducing the Ampera, which is behind me, that is an electric vehicle, vehicle with extended range, so it takes away range anxiety from purely battery electric vehicles. A lot of interest in that. So there's no question that the cutting is almost done. It's the driving for revenue. And I have to say we were very pleased with our market share in the fourth quarter of last year and the first 2 months of this year, where we're up by over half a percentage point in market share.
Yeah, let's just go back, Nick, because I'm interested in that car behind you that you pointed out, the Ampera. How much is one of those going to cost? Who are you actually aiming it at?
Well, this is the first generation Ampera. It's priced at about 42,000 euros, but you take off that the various different incentives that different governments are offering, anything from 5,000 to 7,000 euros. So it comes down into the kind of mid 30,000 euros. That's still quite expensive for a car of that size, but it's got a great drive, and of course the fuel economy depends on how much you drive, but it's incredible. Costs €1 to fill up, to recharge, which means less than €2 for 100 kilometers driving on electric, and most people will drive this car for most of the time on electric, and then when you go on a long distance, it drives further. So there are good cost savings, but no question that the first people who will buy this car are either trendsetters, people who want the latest technology and who are willing to pay a little bit more for it, but also fleets and governments who want to show that they are supporting a move to more green technologies. Those will be the first early adopters, and then when we bring in Generation 2, hopefully the costs will have come down. We can make it a little bit more affordable to the mass markets, and that's where we'll go with Gen 2.
And not a bad time then to be putting out a car that only costs a couple of euros to fill up, because you can't ignore the price of oil at the moment. Given all the uncertainty we see with oil, how concerned are you about the effect that's going to have on the auto industry?
Yes, I am, as I'm sure everybody is. If it does go up significantly, then we are fairly well placed in our offerings, including the Ampera. But what concerns me more is if it's a very sharp spike and it's a supply-driven spike, i.e. we can't get oil out of Libya or somewhere, it'll drive the price up sharply. That will affect the economy generally and the car market. And then you're going to get into a lot of kind of desperate selling as people try to buy market share. And that's never good for the industry's profitability. Typically, though, those type of supply shocks are only fairly short-lived. But I prefer to do without it.
Nick Riley from General Motors Europe there at the Geneva Auto Show. Good talking to you again, Nick. Well, a world away from luxury cars and sustainable energies is Kyrgyzstan, facing a spring of discontent. Food prices are soaring, unemployment is rampant, and the nation is at risk of defaulting on its external debt. Have a look at this from Robin Forrestier-Walker now on a nation struggling to get a grip on its economy.
Poverty flourishes in the shadow of these mountains. The ramshackle town of AlJazeera, population 15,000, the houses were built illegally on private land by rural poor seeking opportunity just outside the capital Bishkek. The Doronov family has no running water, no electricity, and no local school to educate the children. Times are hard. Food price inflation is the highest in the region, up as much as 40% from this time a year ago.
After the revolution in April last year, it looked as if the fortunes of the people in this town had changed, because suddenly electricity pylons began to appear. But after the elections and the formation of the new coalition government, the work ceased. And the people here remain cut off, not just from the grid, but from the wider society.
One explanation is that there is no public money to finish projects like this. The government plans to increase the budget this year by up to 30%, but acknowledges substantial problems.
We have a budget with a deficit and a stagnant economy. Our first priority has been to stabilise the economy through elaborate mechanisms that could provide us with results this year.
That includes raising tax revenues, but by some estimates, as much as 70 to 80% of all the money in Kyrgyzstan flows through the underground economy. And critics say this, above all, must be addressed.
They're not trying to, work with the current situation that we have with the gray economy and see how we can attract those businesses, those entrepreneurs, to come into the official sector and start paying taxes.
The quick fix for Kyrgyzstan will inevitably be aid and loans from international donors, but that means continuing dependency and debt, while towns like AlJazeera remain a symbol of sickness at the root of the Kyrgyz economy.
Now, the continuing unrest we see in the Middle East has its roots in the lack of jobs for the growing young population. Now, the Spanish Prime Minister, José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero, says Europe should create a bank to support emerging democracies. Taimour Nabili sat down with the Prime Minister and asked him, was indebted Europe really in a position to create a Marshall Plan for the fledgling Middle East economies?
Tenemos que distinguir dos planos. Uno son el plano de las instituciones europeas.
We have to differentiate between two plans. One is the plan of European institutions and their capacity for financial cooperation with countries in North Africa and the Arab world. And in Europe, we do have healthy financial institutions, such as the European Investment Bank, and the possibility of having a financial body to support countries in the Mediterranean. And secondly, the Marshall Plan, which, with the help of private companies and large international companies from Europe, North America, Asia, indeed from all over the world, could group together to raise investment for countries that are changing towards democracy. And I can assure you that those companies have plenty of resources. They have plenty of money and they can make the effort. We've got to organise and plan for that. But I think there's a huge opportunity to help these countries get on their feet financially as soon as possible, and also for big companies to open up important markets with millions of citizens, lots of them young people, that when the economy picks up will go on to become potential customers and go on to earn themselves jobs and a more dignified quality of life.
I confess I'm a little surprised. Your background in the Spanish left and what seems to be a global feeling of concern about the strength of private corporations these days, and yet what you're proposing is an entirely private sector-led solution for an area like North Africa. As I say, a little bit surprising.
No, a mí me sorprendería si dijera que fueran a apoyar a países ricos.
I'd be surprised if you suggested I was going to support rich countries, but we're talking about countries with a high percentage of unemployment and poverty, like Egypt, where nearly half the population gets by on €1 a day. So it's good that large international companies can invest and create wealth. There's politics and there's politics. Bill Gates is one of the richest men in the world, but he's also one of the men that invests the most in the fight against malaria and hunger. That's forward-thinking politics. What wouldn't be forward-thinking would be for me to ask Bill Gates to invest in rich countries and areas where people have everything they need. But asking big companies to invest where it's needed is forward-thinking politics, and if we achieve it, it will be a really good thing for those countries and their young people. Because as you correctly said earlier, at the moment our countries